February 7th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. This is our first meeting of 2020. We're glad you're with us. As we get started, we start our meetings, and we'll start our new year by rising together and saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Here.
Commissioner Kulabany?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Mayor Martin?
Here. We have a full appointment tonight. That's great. For those that are here in council chambers, there are copies of tonight's agenda on either side of the room. There's shelves with copies there. If you're watching at home, if you go to downers.us in the lower left-hand corner, there's a link for this week's meetings. This is probably the best version because you get the links to all the additional details that we have up here. Before we go on, the next subject is going to be some previous minute approvals, but I want to let everybody know, just as a reminder, there are several opportunities to address the public and address council as we go through the evening. Try and keep those limited to 5 minutes apiece, and try and think about whether what you've said has already been said. It need not be said 7 or 8 times. We are definitely listening along the way. So with that, is there a motion regarding previous minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the minutes of the December 17th, 2019 meeting as presented.
Second.
Any council questions or comments on those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. This is the first opportunity for public commentary. This is for subjects not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here tonight and want to bring up an issue that is not on tonight's agenda, please go ahead, come on down to the podium, tell us your name, and we'll be happy to hear what you've got to say.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Popolars. I live on Grand Avenue, the section over by Whittier School, so South Grand Avenue. We are fortunate to live in the part of Grand Avenue that has St. Joseph's Creek running through the back of it. So what's considered kind of the west side of Grand Avenue, south of Hill Street. Many of my neighbors in Grand Avenue, 8 to be exact, as well as 3 residents of Fairview Avenue, which also have St. Joseph's Creek go through the back, have been reaching out to the village, working with stormwater for more than 2 years. Actually, we started the process after the October 2017 torrential rains, which essentially caused our stream banks to cave in and erode. Many pieces of the stream bank actually flowed up the creek to the grate that was successfully installed at Hill Street several years ago. I'm here on behalf of our neighbors because we're concerned after more than 2 years of brainstorming ideas and getting direction and then being rerouted into different direction, we're no further along than we were 2 years ago. If anything, we feel that we are set back because we've also had the opportunity to have the floodplains increased and our properties now requiring flood insurance. The most recent feedback that we had is that there was to be funds set aside in the 2020 budget to do a site assessment of the St. Joseph's Creek and recommendation so that we could propose to the neighbors if they would be willing to agree to the proposed plans and grant an assessment or grant an easement to the village to allow them to essentially overtake the property and then come in and do the necessary work. We haven't received any updates. We've had a lot of back and forth, and so what we're asking for is kind of some direction, some guidance on what we can do as next steps. We're really concerned as the backyards continue to shrink and the creek continues to grow in its volume and size.
Thank you. We'll get an update for you and
Okay.
for us as well, because we're
Okay.
certainly interested in it, and we'll be sure to get that to you very soon. The only thing I can say is, and I know this doesn't feel real good, but nothing moves as fast as we wish. Stormwater has been a solid focus of the village for more than a decade, more than 20 years, 22, 23 years. And we're hitting it hard every day, but we'll get a current status for you and get it off to you right away.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Anyone else with subjects not on tonight's agenda? Come on down.
Happy New Year. I guess it's a particularly Happy New Year in Illinois this time. I won't ask how many of you stood in line or are holding off on checking out the availability of marijuana recreationally in Illinois. But I'm not here to talk about that, as you can imagine. I have a handout for the council and 3 extras for staff. David Rose is my name, and I wanted to follow up the prior material that I've been giving you to talk further on the subject of environmental sustainability. In light of the mayor's comment, I'll try to keep my reading of this material and summation of this material to your requested 5 minutes. I was hoping to go through the whole thing, given the agenda that seemed to be fairly short this evening, but I'll try to focus just on the beginning part then. I've indicated in previous remarks on the matter of environmental sustainability that the core question is economic growth environmentally sustainable? I want to develop in these remarks both the logical simplicity and the historical difficulty of the problem. Economists, the relatively few concerned about the matter, define the environmental sustainability of an economy to mean it consumes renewable resources at a rate that allows them to reproduce into the indefinite future, and it shifts from relying on non-renewable resources to consuming renewable resources instead. Both elements should be self-evident simply from the word sustainable. In the case of the former, consuming renewable resources at a rate that undermines reproduction shrinks the supply available for future consumption. Unless the rate of consumption is lowered, the resource eventually depletes because it is unable to reproduce fast enough to maintain itself. The latter should likewise be self-evident from the terms themselves. Consuming a non-renewable resource that doesn't reproduce, at least on a timescale useful to humans, means it eventually depletes in principle, if not in fact. The logic, while not identical, is similar to the renewable resource case. The process of trying to produce the resource for use as raw material at some juncture uses up more resources of the same type and or more resources of other types usable elsewhere than the production yields. In other words, at some juncture, the availability of the resource peaks, so that the effort to continue producing and using it after peak becomes, in effect, economically illogical. Given the logical simplicity, humans confront a significant challenge in the years ahead. Why? Because history shows that thanks to the combination of the economic system known as capitalism and the system of acquiring knowledge known as science, for the last 200 years or so, the period of history known as the Industrial Revolution, humans have been relentlessly pursuing economic growth, the acquisition of ever more material goods and ever more financial wealth, completely oblivious to the impact of this pursuit on the environment, that is, oblivious to whether or not it was environmentally sustainable. In so doing, humans behaved as if they believed this pursuit was sustainable because the Earth's resources were without limit. That blissful way of thinking finally came under scrutiny thanks largely to the threat known these days as climate change. Why? Because climate change amounts to a form of cost socialization that the beneficiaries of economic development could not deflect solely and or primarily away from themselves onto others, those less powerful than they. This erroneous cornucopian belief has led to relentless overconsumption of renewable resources and reduction of supplies of non-renewable resources. And for the sake of time, I'll skip through that part to get to the punchline. The point of this is the following. What economics labels prosperity is, from the perspective of ecology, nothing other than our species relentlessly outcompeting the biological diversity around us. Do we care? So far, not enough to reverse the onslaught. What makes this possible is the fact that we are relying on non-renewable resources. The most important aspect of the problem is that work, that is the production and distribution of the goods and services humans use, relies on non-renewable resources but is not sustainable. Of particular import on that score is the issue of the worldwide peaking of the availability of fossil fuels, most notably conventional crude oil. Crude oil has been the feedstock force multiplier, affording humans the capacity to do work in both quantity and quality beyond anything humans alive before the Industrial Revolution ever imagined. The metaphor energy slave has been used to convey the impact on us. The language may sound inflammatory, but it simply conveys the point that where prior civilizations relied on human slaves, our contemporary civilization relies on energy slaves to maintain its greatness. As we have experienced, using energy slaves has allowed some contemporary humans to live quite well indeed. And what makes the arrangement so seductive is that energy slaves are flexible in the work they can do, they don't unionize or rebel, they don't require much feeding or housing, and they die after they've completed their work. Unfortunately, this seductive arrangement has two key problems. One we know is climate change. Much as we behaved otherwise, the death of energy slaves is not without material impact. The other, the one I want to discuss a bit, is availability, the supply of energy slaves. Once a fossil fuel or any force multiplier is past its peak of supply, the amount of potential work achievable by that resource begins to fall. Improvements in efficiency of using the slaves can help prolong the consequences of peaking, but they do not change the reality. That's obviously a huge problem. Indeed, one benefit of force multiplication for core beneficiaries has been the capacity for one's behavior to exploit and or harm at ever greater physical and psychosociological distances away, leaving one inured to consequences and largely protected from repercussions. Most Americans do not know when crude oil production in the U.S. peaked. By applying one's knowledge of post-World War II history, one should be able to figure it out. Hint, think OPEC oil embargo. That peak, by the way, was predicted by an American petroleum geologist named King Hubbard in the 1950s, a decade when the U.S. was the world's leading oil producer. Few at the time believed him or paid much attention to his prediction. Not surprisingly then, the build-out of America into suburbs and the build-up into urban high-rise edifices continued full throttle. Available evidence suggests conventional crude oil production worldwide peaked in the 2000s. Ponder that as the most significant contributor to the current unrest, polarization, and conflict we see in the U.S. and around the world these days. Ponder that also as a major
David, you're
contributor.
going to run way short.
I'll summarize in a couple minutes if I could. To the financialization of the American and world economies. Peaking yields two basic material problems. One concerns the energy required to maintain existing structures and mobility. The other concerns the diminishing return on investments of both energy and material in the procurement of new energy slaves. The rest of this I'll summarize by saying that for the people who believe in renewable energy or for the people who believe in nuclear energy, you still have the problem of relying on non-renewable resources. So the problem, as a logical problem, does not go away. And that's what I wanted to emphasize this evening. That's where the challenges come in terms of actually dealing with environmental sustainability going forward. Anything less than that simply ignores the logical simplicity and historical difficulty of the problem. I'll leave it to you to read the rest of the material that I wrote and provided for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with subjects not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on then to our consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any council questions or comments on the consent agenda? Any audience questions? Okay, Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Tulowitzki?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Vernon?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Takes us to our active agenda. There is one item on our active agenda tonight. Is there a motion concerning PSEVA?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance establishing an administrative procedure for assessing and determining claims under the Public Safety Employee Benefits Act as presented.
Second.
This portion of our meeting, we take audience questions first prior to taking any action. Are there any audience questions or comments concerning adjustment to our PSEBA procedures? PSEBA, what is PSEBA? Dave, you want to lay that out there real quickly?
It's a state mandated benefit that provides benefits to employees and beneficiaries of catastrophically injured public safety employees. So if somebody gets hurt severely, provides benefits to that person and their family.
There are state rules concerning how municipalities operate in this realm, and this is an adjustment to our procedures to keep in compliance with those rules and to manage those needs as we have them. There's no material change to the state law that's driving this. This is just sort of a cleanup at our end. Any questions from council? Comments? Okay, Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Tewksbury?
Aye.
Commissioner Sabasky?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Vernon?
Aye, that too passes unanimously, which brings us to our first reading portion of the meeting. We have one subject tonight on our first reading. I'm sorry, two subjects. Dave, you want to start us off?
Just one. I hope it's just one.
item, just Mayor.
Oh, we got one removed? I missed that, I'm sorry. One subject tonight on first reading, which has to do with outdoor licenses.
I'll hand it over to Enza for the.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There is only one item on tonight's first reading agenda, and that is a proposed amendment to the Class O liquor license. Currently, the Class O liquor license requires that the main purpose of the outdoor area be for dining purposes only. In order to qualify the BF Brewer Facility License for this Class O license, this proposed ordinance proposes to remove that dining requirement because brewing facilities are exempt from the food service requirement. So therefore, they don't provide dining purposes, so they can't qualify because of that. This proposed ordinance removes that restriction and therefore allows a brewing facility license to qualify for outdoor liquor license. This item was considered by the Liquor Commission on December 5th. They forwarded a favorable recommendation. Answer your question.
Thank you. Any council comments or questions? Rich?
And I understand they're going to have an arrangement with a nearby restaurant to be able to deliver food?
Yes, at the Liquor Commission meeting, that was my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I'll just add that our ordinances are not static. Well, they are static. We try not to be static. And so we're constantly having to reconsider them as the world changes around us. There were times when breweries weren't allowed in themselves in Downers Grove. There's been a lot of change to our liquor license ordinances. We've changed stormwater over the years. Things change, and this is us trying to be accommodating of the world that changes around us. So are there any audience comments or questions on this? Okay, well, we'll move on and we'll reconsider that again next week. Thank
That
you.
ends our first reading. Thank you, Mayor.
Earlier in the evening, I mentioned to people that there were agendas on either side of the room, and I said something to the effect of those watching at home, if you're clicking on the link, will have a better experience. That's exactly right. I brought my previously printed agenda tonight, which had another item on it. So things move, and we try and keep everybody up to date online as much as possible. With that, manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Attorney's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Only one item, and that is the amendment to the Class O liquor license. Will be on next week's active agenda.
Thank you, Enza. Mayor and council member reports. Are there any council member reports? Rich, starting with you.
Just one report. The Downers Grove Historical Society is sponsoring an event on Wednesday, January 22nd, starting at 6:30 at Emmett's, and it will be on the Historic Home Program. That is a joint project between the Historical Society and the museum. And then our own Stan Popovich from the village will be presenting the Downers Grove Landmark Ordinance. So if you live in a historic home and you think it's worthy of preserving either historically or physically or both, you should attend that meeting. And you could check us out on our Facebook page, Downers Grove Historical Society, and I look forward to seeing a lot of people there.
Thanks, Rich. Leslie?
No report, Mayor.
Nicole?
No report, Mayor.
Kavanaugh?
Just want to remind village residents, do not get caught out like the Gray family. This week through next week, the village is picking up Christmas trees. And so just a reminder, as the kind of the year and the week gets going, you can drop off Christmas trees at Whitlock and McCullum through the 13th, as well as have your Christmas trees picked up at home through the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. Marge?
No report, Mayor.
Greg?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Fantastic. And the only thing I have is an appointment for this evening. Megan, would you read that?
A resolution appointing members to village boards and commissions. Whereas Mayor Barnett has made the following appointments to village boards and commissions. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the following appointments. Architectural Design Review Board, appoint Amy Gasson to a 3-year term expiring August 31st, 2022. Plan Commission, appoint Stephen Toth to a term expiring August 31, 2021.
Thank you. Motion concerns?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the resolution as presented.
Second.
Anybody have any comments or questions or things they want to add to the discussion tonight? Rich?
Any of my colleagues want to go first?
I just would like to thank
Mark?
the people who are giving of their time. Amy Gasson especially has been doing big duty over at the Plan Commission, and much appreciated, and glad to see you moving over to Architectural Design and Review Board. So thank you.
Rich?
I have a few comments. Mayor Barnett asked me to vet the candidates and to have a little interview and determine if I would be able to make the recommendation. Obviously, it's his responsibility because that's one of his specific duties is to make the appointments. Our responsibility is to give advice and counsel and approval. I didn't know Steve before, but we had a delightful conversation. I was pleased that he has a BS in civil engineering. He is a senior project engineer for Chicago Heights Glass, which gives him a lot of experience in the construction field. And think about the people who put the glass on the side of high-rise buildings. That's what Steve is involved with. So he's no stranger to blueprints. He's no stranger to construction sites, which will be very useful. So I give him my hearty recommendation to Mayor, and he agreed with me. Amy Gasson, I didn't really have to talk to in advance because I've been working alongside Amy in historic preservation for many years. She is a licensed architect. She got a master's in architecture through University of Illinois. She's served on the Plan Commission for the last 4 years. She's been a director of the Downers Grove Historical Society for also a 4-year period. Is co-founder of the American Foursquares of Downers Grove with her husband Dave. She's done that for over 3.5 years, and before her service in the Historical Society, she also was the senior advisor to the chair of Friends of the Edwards House. Amy had the distinction of serving on the ad hoc subcommittee on historic preservation, so she had hands-on experience in actually helping to craft the ordinance that has propelled Downers Grove so nicely, because we only had 2 properties that were landmarked before that, and since that, in that period since 2015, we have now 26. She's also involved with the Landmarks Illinois Chicago Suburban Preservation Alliance, attending most of those meetings, and that's where other historic preservation commissions get to talk about what they do. She's literally knocked on hundreds of doors, inviting historic homeowners to events, and literally hung flyers on thousands of doorknobs. And most notably, she helped in the applications of 14 of the historic landmarks. So I gave her my hearty recommendation.
Thanks for your work on that, Rich, and thanks for the nice words tonight. Boards and commissions, as you all know, play a big role in our village. We have a number of them with nearly 100 residents that serve in various capacities, and this body appreciates their input. It is a little bit start and stop sometimes for some of them, but whether it's the Liquor Commission considering outdoor licenses or it's Plan Commission considering new developments, the list of things that this body up here has to consider over the course of a year is great, and we really appreciate the input we get from our residents that help us in that. Steve and Amy are both here tonight. That's great to see you guys. Thank you again. And with that, is there a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Kulovany,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye, that too passes unanimously. Thank you all again. With that, we would normally adjourn, but we are not going to this evening. We have a little meeting planned afterwards. Greg?
Mayor, I move that the council convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the village.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you all for coming tonight. Hopefully, we'll see some of you next week.